Today I'm here to bring you another installment of disturbing campfire stories from the Walking Dead universe. This is the series where I highlight the shorter stories from the franchise that are still interesting, but don't necessarily warrant their own entire video. If you're enjoying this type of content, be sure to hit that like button and drop a sub to see more videos like this. In the early days of the outbreak, the military had set up refugee camps in designated areas for survivors to take shelter from the dead. One of these refugee centers, located in Georgia, would see a fire break out, and its population devolve into a panic. During the chaos, a woman in her 20s named Anna would be trampled by the mob, resulting in a severely injured leg. Despite the fear, a young man named Sam would stop to help Anna and rescue her from further injury, but after everything was said and done, the two would find themselves separated from the group and forced to survive alone. Because of the selfless act, Anna would begin to develop feelings for Sam and vice versa, blooming into a full-on relationship as the two endured the struggles of the wasteland together. But this would prove harder than expected, as Anna's leg would never heal properly, making her slow and weak. Despite this, Sam would never abandon her, choosing to move from house to house at her pace as their relationship grew stronger. But having to always play it safe, neither one of them would develop the skills to proficiently kill walkers, instead electing to hide from the dead. This would work for a while, but eventually their luck would run out as Sam would dislocate his shoulder, leading to the two becoming trapped by a single walker inside a house. Even if they had a gun, Anna admits it would have taken 5 or 6 bullets for them to take it down, so they were at its non-existent mercy. They had enough fruit scavenged to last a few days, but without a distraction, it would only be a matter of time before it got to them. That is, if Rick and Carol hadn't come across the two, freeing them from the walker and relocating Sam's shoulder. It was clear the couple were just scared survivors trying to make it the best they could, so Rick would invite the two to come back to the prison and build a new life for themselves, which is all they ever really wanted. Rick would suggest he and Carol finish off their search of the area for supplies before heading out, but Carol argues they could get it done faster if Sam and Anna search the other side of the neighborhood despite their injuries, in which the eager couple agrees, wanting to show their value. Arming Sam and Anna with a gun each and a watch to keep track of time, they would separate. But this would prove to be a mistake, as after only a couple hours, Rick and Carol would come across Anna's severed leg lying next to a basket of fruit. And all the way across the street were walkers feasting on the rest of her corpse. Sam was nowhere to be found. How could this have happened? Rick gave them guns. Why wouldn't they have fired? Anna's leg was cut clean off, implying she had to have been bit before Sam amputated. But with the dead surrounding them, Sam most likely had to run without her, and for some reason, never made it back. They weren't skilled survivors, but how did this go so wrong so quick? Most importantly, where was Sam now? Well, following the governor's attack on the prison, that question would be held on the back burner as our group was scattered into the wasteland. Over time, each of them would encounter a map at the rail crossings, leading them all to a place called Terminus, promising sanctuary. But this was a lie. The signs were made to lure in unsuspecting survivors to feed the cannibalistic Terminus population. Sam must have found one of these signs after running from the dead, as when our main group is captured and led to a bleeding trough, Rick would look down the line to see him trembling in fear on the other side. Maybe he thought Terminus was the prison Rick spoke of in his panic state, or maybe he was just looking for sanctuary, period. Regardless, he had been lured in and captured. Despite not being a strong survivor, Sam had made it farther than most. But unfortunately, like Anna, he wasn't cut out to beat the wasteland. This story is a brutal one. Sam and Anna appeared to be genuinely good people and had the misfortune of dying in some of the most gruesome ways possible. Anna's death leaves so many mysteries behind. Why didn't Sam run to Rick and Carol for help or fire the gun? Unfortunately, these are questions that haven't been answered, but this is the kind of thing Tales of the Walking Dead should be covering. I'd love to see what kind of mindset Sam was in as he found himself alone in the woods with nothing and nobody, wandering down the tracks to his inevitable death. But I'm curious to hear in the comments what you guys think happened here. Maybe somebody got to them. Maybe it was an accident. But either way, it wasn't deserved. When the dead began to walk in the streets, there were many conflicting interpretations of what they really were. A common theory among religious folk was that the apocalypse was a test from God, but in a small village in Baja California, a priest and his surviving congregation had believed the God they knew would never do such a thing, instead believing the walkers to be of evil, desiring they abandon their faith. But near their village lied a vineyard owned by the wealthy business family, the Abigails, a large walled-in estate managed by Celia Flores, the family housekeeper, who formed a mother-son-like relationship with the Abigail's son, Thomas, over her many years of service to them, and remained in the vineyard along with the staff and their families when the world fell, developing a strong, like-minded community within the first few days of the outbreak. Celia, however, had a very bizarre way of thinking when it came to the walkers, believing the dead had always walked among the living, viewing the turned as no different from them, simply the next stage of life. She would be compassionate to the walkers and even see herself as their protector, locking them in the Abigail wine cellar similar to Herschel's barn in season 2 of the main show, going as far as to put her own son Louise down there. What made Celia dangerous, however, was how she saw those who would put down the dead as nothing but cold-blooded murderers, as, in her eyes, these people weren't dead at all, and the staff among the Abigail estate had bought into Celia's beliefs as well. And as the priest in the neighboring village had begun holding services to rally his congregation against her growing horde in the cellar, Celia knew she would have to act to protect them. To the parishioners, Celia perpetuated evil, hoarding what they believed to be an attempt to turn them against God. Vowing to defeat said evil, the priest would pass around communal wafers before ending the service and arming his people to free the dead from their curse. But as they take up their weapons, Thomas Abigail would pull up and plead to them to find peace, genuinely fearing conflict between the groups as he did not want to see bloodshed on either side. But as the priest expresses they have no other choice despite the respect they had for Thomas, the parishioners would begin bleeding from their eyes and collapsing in pain. One by one, they would all drop. Children, elderly, all screaming as Thomas could do nothing but watch in confusion and horror, catching the priest as he fell to his knees next. Within seconds, the village's remaining residents would all be dead and begin to turn. The gruesome scene would be discovered by our fear crew as they arrived in Mexico, as the reanimated parishioners would come for them. Fighting off the dead and loading themselves up into Thomas's abandoned truck, the group would reach the Abigail vineyard and be greeted by Celia and the staff, where Strand would discover Thomas had been bit, presumably by one of the village walkers. Strand had only fought so hard to reach Mexico as he and Thomas had been in a relationship for years, and now that he lied on his deathbed, Strand would express the desire to die by Thomas's side, having nothing left to live for. And Celia, believing death was nothing to fear, would grant him that wish in the form of a poisoned communal wafer, guaranteeing death to those who consume it. Celia had somehow replaced the parishioners' supply of communal wafers with a similar batch laced with an unknown substance, killing all the residents with one move as a way to protect her growing walker horde after finding out their plans. And when Daniel Salazar would confront her on this atrocity, she would claim her hands were clean, further reinforcing her belief the walkers were simply the next stage of life. And in Celia's eyes, our fear crew were the ones who just murdered an entire town, not her. Despite Celia's beliefs, Thomas did not want to live as a walker, and didn't want Strand to die for him either. So, as Thomas stopped breathing, Victor would put him down with a bullet through the head, guaranteeing a banishment from the estate, as Celia would be enraged by this act. Despite her clear loss of morality, Celia's ideology would begin to sow division among the group, as Nick would desire to stay and follow her ways, while Daniel and Madison would condemn it. So, to protect her son, and by extension Strand, Madison would lure Celia into the cellar under the false desire to learn of her beliefs, but instead locks her inside, dooming her to be consumed by those she believed to still be living, one of which, her own son Louise. And to assure this way of thinking died along with her, Daniel would set the villa ablaze in a confused state. Although justice had been served, nothing could rectify the horrors inflicted onto the parishioners who believed they were doing the right thing. This is a story that shows us what happens when somebody takes their beliefs too far. Celia had viewed the people who killed the walkers as the real monsters in this world. And despite what we see with Herschel changing his mind, Celia was too far gone, willing to murder children in the name of what she believed. Weddings are meant to be a time of happiness and celebration, but unfortunately for young couple Jessica and Oscar, they chose to tie the knot on Monument Day. Despite rumors of a strange virus threatening to close the Mexican-American border, newlyweds Jessica and Oscar Diaz continued the celebrations of their big day late into the night at the Rosarito Beach Hotel in Baja California. However, while dancing with his daughter, Jessica's father Charles would drop to the floor, suffering a heart attack and passing on the spot. While the crowd surrounds them, Jessica would attempt to perform CPR on her father, but within a matter of seconds, he would turn from the wildfire infection and bite into his daughter's face on her wedding day. The attendees could only sit and watch in horror and confusion. But before the chaos could spread to the rest of the building, hotel manager Elena Reyes would lock the wedding party inside the ballroom, believing it was the right thing to do at the time. What followed was a bloody massacre. However, unlike stories like the arena, there were survivors. Oscar and a small group of wedding goers, including Jessica's mother Eileen, managed to escape the human buffet, and were able to contain some of the dead in various rooms, including Jessica herself, who Oscar managed to lead all the way up to their room on the 17th floor, presumably after turning. Tensions were high between the staff and surviving wedding goers over the next month, as the latter would desperately seek the staff to obtain the master keys for the hotel, only succeeding when willing to go as far as kidnapping Elena's nephew and holding him hostage. But in a twist we don't see often in the Walking Dead universe, our fear crew would arrive to the hotel and actually quell the tensions between the two groups by encouraging Oscar and the wedding party to give the master keys back to let them clear the dead out, which surprisingly they agree, securing the hotel for all parties by working together as one. What followed was a dinner representing peace and forgiveness between the two groups, but Oscar remained distant, struggling to let go of Jessica, who still remained reanimated in their room. But Victor Strand, having gone through something similar very recently, is able to get through to him on a personal level, and eventually, Oscar would allow Strand to do what he should have done a month ago, put his late wife to rest. Oscar would be strong enough to let go, but for others like Jessica's mother Eileen, the loss would eventually be too much to bear. The story of the hotel does not end here, but with Oscar finding the strength to let go of Jessica and forgive the staff, the massacre at the Diaz wedding would be left in the past. This story once again shows us the horror and confusion of the early days, but also shows us the potential of teamwork when two parties are willing to make peace. Despite what may come later in the hotel story arc, Oscar makes for a compelling character, having the strength to make peace with what happened. But like in a lot of real-life scenarios, some would allow the grief to consume them. But that's gonna do it for today's installment of disturbing campfire stories from the Walking Dead universe. There are plenty more stories to cover from this franchise, so if there's one specifically you want to see, feel free to let me know in the comments down below and I'll try my best to get around to it. Thank you so much for watching.